the introduction. Welcome. We are very happy to welcome Gustav Kortheim for this working group. Gustav will give an introduction into LLMs, and he's really an expert. So I think this is an excerpt from your lecture series that you gave at IPITA, and which was cited in Le Monde. So very interesting. So please start.
Thank you for inviting me. So I guess I will switch to English because some people don't speak French. So today I'm going to present you statistical language modeling. So I will not focus on other kind of way to modelize a language, for example, symbolic language modeling and so on. I will only focus on statistical method. And I'm going to present you some architectures that has been used in the history to grasp the language statistically. So I'm going to present n-grams, feed-forward neural networks, recurrent neural networks, and especially the attention mechanism. And I will, at the end, focus on transformers. So I have a lot of slides, and it can be very huge. So I will try to skip some part to only focus on relevant things. And don't hesitate to ask questions. This can be interactive if you want. So I will start very basically. In natural language processing, we process tokens, and tokenization is the process that split text into individual words. So we prefer to don't use the word, but to use the word token instead. So basically, language model will have as input tokens, and it will produce tokens as output. And there are several challenges for tokenization. For example, we have to consider different ways to delimit space, punctuation. We have to take into account the special cases such as number, dates, URL, hashtag, and so on. So here, a very simple way to tokenize a sentence. We have natural language processing and helps computers to understand human language, and we can have a very simple rule-based approach to separate this text into different tokens. So for example here I only use a split by space, but here you see that we need some complex system to handle a specific case, for example emails, dates, and so on. So we have two approaches. We have rule-based approaches. We use a regular expression to tokenize our text, and we also have a machine learning approach. So the idea is to learn the tokenization using the data. Yes?
So is this a syntactic token or a semantic? Because for example, n'importe quoi. So would you tokenize quoi other than n'importe quoi? I mean, that's one thing semantically.
Usually we don't take into account syntactical rule for tokenization.
So you would put one token for n'importe quoi?
Well, it depends. It depends on how you will tokenize it. Rule-based approach are very simple. Usually, they might consider some contraction and so on, but it's not very complicated. Whereas machine learning approach, such as byte pair encoding subword tokenization, induce some subword tokens. So they start with a very simple vocabulary, and they identify common patterns that they can merge together. So we can, for example, if n'importe quoi is very often in the text, it will be considered as a single token.
I guess problems can be different depending on the natural language. When there is an alphabet, it's more or less the same.
Yeah, and it is a problem for a multilingual model, because if you have a model who handle Chinese and English at the same time, you will have to have a good tokenizer in some way. So I will focus on the simplest probabilistic language model, which is called the N-gram. But I want to remind you what is a language model. So a language model is a simple concept to understand. It is a probabilistic model that computes the probability of a sequence of words and computes the probability of an upcoming word. And it has been useful for various applications such as translation, speech recognition, summarization, and so on. So for example, if you want to perform speech recognition, we will need a language model that assigns a higher probability to ISO of an rather than eyes O of an. And how to compute the probability of a sequence of words? So we can apply the chain rule, and here we can apply the chain rule to a sentence. So for example, I am Gustav. The probability of this sentence can be decomposed of probability of I, probability of am knowing I, probability of Gustav knowing I am. But how to estimate these probabilities? Can we just count and divide? Well, this is not possible because we will need a lot of data to count, for example, the occurrence of I am Gustav, I love natural language processing. And we will probably never see enough data for estimating this kind of long sentences. So instead, we rely on the Markov assumption that claims that we can approximate this probability using only a limited context window. So we have unigram that don't take into account any context. We have also bigram that take into account only one token in the context, trigram for two, and so on. So n-gram consider n minus 1 tokens in the context. And obviously this is not useful to modelize the language because the language has a long distance relationship, and this kind of model will need to be very large. Let's take an example for estimating bigram probabilities. So to estimate this probability, we can count the occurrence of tokens. So let's take an example. Here, if I want to estimate the probability of am knowing I will count the number of times we see I am together, divided by the number of times we see I. So here, the probability would be 2 divided by 3. Okay, so now we have trained a bigram language model. How to evaluate the performance? So we want a language model. So yeah, we calculate probabilities on a training set, and we will evaluate our language model on an unseen test set. So we want a language model that best predicts the test set, data that has been unseen. Therefore, a good language model assigns a higher probability to the test set than another language model. So if we have a test set that has n tokens, then a good language model will assign a better probability to the test set, rather a higher probability compared to the bad language model. And here we see that probability depends on the number of tokens, so that the longer the text, the smaller the probability. But we want a metric that doesn't depend on the number of tokens, so we will normalize the probability using a geometric mean here, and it is called the perplexity. And perplexity is a metric that is very well used in natural language processing. For example, if you want to train ChatGPT, you will evaluate the performance during training using perplexity. And perplexity is very simple to understand. It is the inverse probability of the test set normalized by the length. And so we see that minimizing perplexity is the same as maximizing probability on the test set. And there are some practical issues. I will only present a small number but we can see some unknown word in the test set, and the probability will drop to 0, and we will have a perplexity that we can't compute because we will divide by 0. So here we can add some smoothing. So here we use a Laplace smoothing, and we pretend that we saw each word one more time that we did. And I saw, yes?
So I understand the normalization, but can you go back? What is the purpose? So we want to evaluate how good the model is, and then where is the test set? So when you started with test set, there it was.
Yeah.
Can you
So
go back to the test set?
yeah.
on the slide?
So usually what you want is that you have a huge data set, and you will divide your data set. You will train on one part, and you will evaluate on another part which has not been seen during training, so that you have a fair evaluation.
Okay, so I have two models, and they both train on the same test training set, and then I serve them the same test set.
Mhm,
And then I
exactly.
check what probability they
Mm.
probability from the test set. So okay, how likely it seems to them that the test set comes out.
Can you repeat?
So I mean the probability of the test set is that to which extent would you expect this sequence to be generated in this language, and it's a good sequence, so it's not nonsense. Because if I would I mean the test set should be something meaningful. No?
Yes, it is. For example, if I have a data set of tweets, I can train on some tweets, and I can evaluate on some other tweets that has been written by human.
Okay.
Mm.
Mhm.
And the goal is that we want a language model that is not surprised by the test set,
Okay.
so that it can predict well the test set.
Mhm.
Mhm. And to avoid underflow, we usually do all the computation in the log space, so that instead of multiplying numbers, we'll add a number in the log space. And there are some methods to improve the n-gram, so we can use backing off. So I will not focus a lot on this kind of techniques, but backing off is a way to progressively use short context under certain conditions. So for example, if I have a 3 gram but the count is very low, I can use a big gram instead, and so on. We have also interpolation methods where we train several individual models and we will interpolate between these models. So now we will go from n-gram to neural network language models. So neural network language models solve major problems with n-grams. With n-grams, the number of parameters increase exponentially. So this is a problem, obviously. And n-grams have no way to generalize from training to the test set. So instead, neural language models will not count words, but they will predict. And they will do the prediction task using a method which is projecting words into a continuous space, in which words with similar context will have similar representation. And this is a very powerful idea in natural language processing. So how to represent word meaning? So this idea comes from a psychologist which is called Osgood in 1957. And he claims that word meaning can be seen as a point in a multidimensional space, where here we have a three-dimensional space. It is an affective space, and a word can be described as a point in three dimensions: the valence dimension, the arousal dimension, and the dominance dimension. So word meaning as a point in a multidimensional space. We have also another idea which comes from philosophers such as Ludwig Wittgenstein, and it says that we can define meaning by its linguistic distribution. The meaning of a word is its use in a language. And this is the same thing when the linguist Harris says that if A and B have almost identical environment, here environment means word around them, then they are synonyms. So natural language processing blends these two ideas together so that we can define meaning as a point in a multidimensional space based on linguistic distribution. So we will automatically induce the space based on data. And the meaning of a word is a vector called an embedding. So here, embedding means two different things. It is a bit ambiguous. It means the process of taking a word and projecting it in a continuous space, but it also refers to the vector resulting from this projection. Okay, and before going to neural network, I just want to remind you the fundamental component of a machine learning classifier. So,
Sorry.
Yeah.
So in this space, is there a topology? I mean, you paint knees next to point and hearers next to random and so. So you have some kind of closeness,
exactly. So this kind of relationships is automatically induced by the training process, and so the first studies on embeddings discover that this language model has some kind of understanding of relationship between words. So, for example, here we have a
kind of continuous. I mean, two meanings are not far apart.
and we can also add and subtract meaning. So we have some kind of arithmetic. So we can, for example, take king minus queen, and it will be equal to the vector human. Mm.
Is there one usually accepted space for with several dimensions, or you can embed all the words of a given language? Or?
Today we have what we call multilingual sentence embedding models that can take nearly more than 100 languages and can project it into a common space. Mm-hmm.
With how many dimensions?
I don't really know, but usually it's a lot of dimension. Like I would say the order of magnitude is between 1,000 and 10,000. So we will have a vector, and the length of the vector is 1,000, 10,000. It's a very large vector. And for example, Facebook trained a model to perform a translation between 100 languages, and you can have any source and target language because they use a common space. So I will remind you the fundamental components of a machine learning classifier. So we have a feature representation of an input X. We have a classification function that will compute the estimated class. We'll have an objective function for learning. In natural language, in NLP, we'll always, or nearly always, use the cross anthropilios. And it is a loss function that will give us a notion of distance between estimated and real classes. And we need to minimize this distance between predicted and real values. So we need an algorithm for optimizing the objective function, and here we'll use the stochastic gradient descent that is used to minimize this loss function. So I will not go into the detail of stochastic gradient descent, cross-entropy loss, and so on. I will only focus on architectures for my talk. Don't hesitate to ask me questions. So, fit for all neural networks. Usually when you want to present a neural network, you begin by presenting a binary logistic regression, which is a very simple classification method in traditional machine learning. So here we can take as input a sequence of tokens. Our features will be manually made. It will be handmade. So for example, we can have a features that is the number of token, the number of positive token, and the number of no. This will be a vector, and this vector is a feature representation of my sentence. And in logistic regression, we train a weight vector that will project our feature representation into here a scalar, because I want to know if my sentence is positive or negative. So it will be a scalar between 0 and 1. And usually we have a real number, and we want to have as output a value between 0 and 1, so we'll use a nonlinear function which is called sigmoid function. And we can do the same thing for multi-classification, where we can have, for example, the probability of having a positive, a negative, or a neutral class. And here, instead, we will use a softmax nonlinear function, which is a generalization of the sigmoid function, where we have a vector of real numbers, and it will output a vector of a number between 0 and 1, where the sum is equal to 1. So we'll have a probability distribution on the classes. And usually we take the highest probability. And a neural unit is, in some way, a multinomial logistic regression, where here we can use some other nonlinear activation function. So here we have the sigmoid function, but in neural network we can also use other kind of functions, such as the hyperbolic tan or the ReLU, which is very used in natural language processing, so rectify the linear unit. And here is a feed-forward network with one hidden layer, and this hidden state is the result of one neural unit. So one hidden layer is composed of several neural units with their own weight matrices. This is the same thing here. We can also, as input, give already pre-trained embedding from another model. And I want to emphasize the fact that it is very important to introduce activation function, because without them, a multi-layer neural network is equivalent to a single-layer neural network, because a linear combination of a linear combination is a linear combination. And usually the loss function for a binary classification task is this. So here y hat is the estimated class, and y is the real class, and this is a cross entropy loss that defines a function, a distance function between real and estimated class. And as our prediction is 0 or 1, we can simplify this by only the negative log likelihood of the estimated class. And we will use this result to perform our error backpropagation, so that we can we need to minimize this. So I will not go into the detail of error backpropagation, but there are very good video on YouTube. They visualize the backpropagation calculus, and it is very powerful to understand it.
Just a word about the problem caused by the discontinuities with taking the derivative of the value, how it is handled.
What is the question?
How is handled the problem that there is a discontinuities?
Yeah. So, but basically, you apply the chain rule where to derive this, you will need to derive this, and so on. So, I don't know if I answered to your
Yeah,
question.
but when you have discontinuities like the ReLU function or other activations.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So the network
It's not
that you show-
differentiable.
Yeah, usually all is differentiable. Otherwise, you can't perform this.
So is the network that you show is the one that should calculate the loss in the sense that it tells me you are in the class or you're not in the class?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
So this is the loss, and the thing that will optimize the translation so that the loss is small, this is something else. We didn't see it. Or so this is just evaluating the quality of
Yeah, yeah. And you will calculate gradients to lower this value.
Also, okay, so if I have a function that tells me whether I'm on the right way or not, then I can
Yeah.
get the gradient out.
Exactly.
Okay.
Mm. So, how to perform language modeling using feed-forward neural network? So, a feed-forward neural language model take as input previous word, and it will output a probability distribution over possible next word. So, this is very similar to Ngram, where we use the Markov assumption. And unlike Ngrams, neural language models can handle much longer histories, generalize better over context of similar words thanks to the continuous space, and are more accurate to word prediction. So this is the mathematics behind, but I will give you the illustrated approach. So here, we have a feed-forward neural network for language modeling that take 3 tokens in the context, and the goal is to predict the next token. So for all the, what will be the next token? And here we will have a vector that will give us the index of the token in our vocabulary. So here it is a one-hot vector. When we have a 1 at the 35 index, all is at the 992 index and so on. And we will multiply this one-hot vector to an embedding matrix. So this is a new thing with a feed-forward neural network, is that we will train at the same time the embedding process. And the embedding layer is just another hidden layer where we train another weight matrix that perform this projection.
So you learn at the same time the matrix representing
E-
embedding.
Exactly. So here we have we will train 3 matrices: U, W, and E. And we can, for example, cut at the end of the training. We can cut the model and only take the embedding matrix to have good embeddings for other tasks, for example. Yes. So embedding is the process of projecting word into a continuous space. But it is also, this is ambiguous, it is also the vector resulting from this process. So this is the vector, an embedding of a word is a vector representing this word in a multidimensional space.
So, yeah. So it also takes n-gram. Because you said you wanted to avoid this n-gram thing because somehow it just looked at just before. I understood that, but no.
Yeah. So ngram only count. So if you want to have to perform next word prediction using ngram, you will only look at your probabilities, and your probabilities were estimating using counting of occurrences, and you will take the highest probability. Here it is completely different. Yes, you take only a fixed window size in the context. You will not take all the history, but it is not based on counting occurrences. It is based on unbending and prediction. And here you see that the output is probability distribution on all the words. So we have very large matrices to train. Imagine that, I will give you at the end what are the architecture of GPT-4, for example, GPT-3, and it is very large. So to better understand the unbending process, we have one hot encoding of a word, and we will multiply it by a weight matrices so that we have at the end an unbending of this word. So the unbending matrices have an unbending for each word in the vocabulary, and we train it. So at the end, at the beginning, it is a random initialization, and at the end, we capture some kind of relationship between the words. Yes?
Can the granularity of tokens be different from word, or
yes. So sometimes I refer to word because it's simpler to understand. But usually you have subword. You start, for example, you can start with a very small vocabulary, A, B, C, D, and so on. And you can have some merge based on frequencies in the training set. And so at the end you can have a huge vocabulary, but it is not necessarily equal to words. It can, but it's not necessarily.
you have maybe examples, simple examples?
For example, beautifully. Usually you will have beautiful and li. Because li appears a lot, beautiful appears a lot, and sometimes you can combine the two tokens together. Okay, and during training, you will take the negative log of the estimated word. So here it's Fitch, and you will perform the error propagation using this result. So how to improve training? I will not go into the details, but we can tweak hyperparameters such as batch size, learning rate, activation function, the number of hidden layers, the number of neural units. We can also apply regularization methods, so normalize input values, add dropout, add weight decay, so I will not go into the detail. And other technique, label smoothing, good weight initialization, other kind of algorithm, such as gradient descent with momentum.
For example, the hyperparameters, we can try to learn them also. We go to the beta level.
Yeah, some people try to implement, for example, genetic algorithm to find a good architecture, good number of hidden layer, neural unit, and so on. There are also some paper which is called hyper network, and they introduce a large network that predict parameters of small network. So it is another kind of thing. Now I will dig into a recurrent neural network. So don't hesitate to stop me, because with question I think I will not have time to finish in 1 hour. So language is a temporal phenomenon, and feed-forward neural networks assume simultaneous access to previous tokens. So they will only look at a fixed size window of words, and we will slide this window to perform next word prediction. Here, recurrent neural network will handle the temporal nature of language without using arbitrary fixed size window. So that means that we can take into the context a huge amount of tokens if we want. Because here we will have a memory that will encode earlier processing, and this memory will be used to inform decision to be made at later steps. So it will inform next prediction for the next steps. So it is a bit fuzzy. I will introduce you the concept. So here is a schematic view of a feed-forward neural network. So we have 3 words. We'll project these 3 words into an hidden representation, and this hidden representation will be projected again to have our estimated class. For recurrent neural network, it is not this. We'll have the word at a time t. We'll project it to have an hidden representation, but we'll also use the earlier hidden representation, and we will project it to have our new hidden representation. So here we see that we have a temporal processing, and this has been very useful to handle language, but also to perform time series and so on, because it handles more the temporal nature of data. So here you see that we train another weight matrix, so the matrix U, that will project the previous hidden representation into the new one. And usually we will concatenate the result of the two. Here, we see that.
And so what becomes now the new bus of the hash key?
Mm-hmm. And it is this thing. So we always use the same weight matrices, but we will pass the hidden representation at each processing step. So that if you want to train a recurrent neural network to perform language modeling, we will project a word into an hidden representation. Using this hidden representation, we can output a probability distribution to have the next word. Then the next word is here. We will project it again, but we will use the previous hidden representation to perform the prediction task of the next word, and so on, and so on. And here, at each time, we use a loss for training. So the negative log of the word we want to predict. And if we want a model to generate new stuff, we can input a beginning word such as this specific marker. We sample a word, the highest word with the highest probability. We give it as input, and we do this again. And we can generate new stuff like this. So recurrent neural network can be used for several natural language processing tasks, such as sequence labeling. So if you want to predict the part of speech in sentence, we can perform sequence classification. So for example, we can classify whether a text is a spam or not, whether it is positive or negative. We can perform language modeling, so we see it. And we can perform some tasks that require so for example, we can perform machine translation, where we have as input a sequence of words, and we need to output a different sequence of words, not necessarily the same length. So we can take, for example, as input French language, and as output it will give the translation in English or Spanish. And usually we use encoder-decoder architecture, so it can be the same model. but the encoder will give an hidden representation of the whole sequence, and this hidden representation of the whole sequence will be used to decode. For example, we take the hidden representation of an English sentence and we use it to decode and have a translated sentence in French, for example. And we can also improve a recurrent neural network using several methods such as stacking or using bidirectional. So we take left to right and right to left representation. So this is very powerful for sequence classification, for example. And okay, so now if you want to train our model to perform encoding, decoding, here we'll give an English. So let's say I'm doing English to Spanish translation. We give an English sentence. Then we predict that. Then we give a specific marker to say that it is the end of the sentence, and then we will predict using sampling the translated sentence, and we will perform the error backpropagation using only the negative log of this translated sentence. We don't care about the output of our encoder. So it is the same thing here. And here you see that it is this hidden representation that will be used to represent the whole sentence, because it has encoded earlier processing, so in some way it is the memory of the whole sentence. And to improve the result, sometimes people copy this memory at each decoding step, so that we don't forget information. But there is still a problem, because this final hidden state acts as a bottleneck. It must represent everything about the meaning of the source text, but information at the beginning of the sentence may not be equally well represented in the context vector. So here, attention mechanism is introduced. It is a solution to the bottleneck problem. It allows the decoder to get information from all the hidden set of the encoder. And the idea is to have a single fixed length vector C, context vector C, that is the weighted sum of all the encoder hidden states, and the weights focus on particular part of the source text that is relevant to the token the decoder is currently producing. So here we don't have anymore a static context vector, but a context vector that is dynamically derived for each token at the decoding process.
No. So instead of taking just the last hidden state,
Exactly.
wait,
Yeah. We will have a weighting sum that is dynamically derived at each token that we want to decode. So here, how to compute here. So we want a context vector C. So we need to compute how equivalent each encoder state is to the decoder state. So here the last decoder state in my decoding process. But what is revelant? What is this fuzzy concept? So here we will implement revelance as a dot product similarity. So this will be the dot product between each encoder state and our last decoder state. And as we want a vector of weights, that we will apply the softmax to this vector, so that the softmax will give a weight that go from 0 to 1, and that the sum of the weights is equal to 1. So we'll have a probability distribution on the encoder states. And at the end, we will perform a weighted sum using this weight. So I think it will be simple on this illustrated example. Let's say that I'm here. The curious focus of my attention is YY, and I want to predict YY plus 1. So I want to calculate this context vector CY. And to calculate this context vector, I will need to take the last decoder state and to compute dot product between each encoder state, so dot product between this state and this state, between this state and this state, and so on. Then we apply the softmax, so that we have attention weights that sum to 1. And using these attention weights, we will have this resulting vector. So we perform a weighted sum. Okay, so this is the idea of attention, and it is very well used in natural language processing nowadays. This is also a huge idea that has been used in transformers, for example. So there are other kind of model. I will not deal with it, but this kind of model is a bit more complex in the architecture, and they use some gated mechanism to have a better flow of information. But I will not deal with it. It is called LSTM, and it has replaced recurrent neural network because it is far better. Especially it avoids some training instabilities. So here we see that a neural unit for feed-forward neural network only take as input a token or several tokens, for example, the last 3 tokens. And here for recurrent neural network, we will take also a previous hidden representation that encode a memory of earlier processing. And yeah, LSTM introduced again another thing, but I will not go into the detail, to deals with transformers. So compared to transformers, transformers offer new mechanism. So positional encodings and self-attention. Positional encodings helps to represent time, and self-attention helps focus on how words relate to each other over long distances. And unlike recurrent neural network, the computation at each time step are independent of all the other steps, so that we can perform in parallel all the computation. It is very, very powerful, and thanks to it, we can have a large language model that has been trained on nearly all the internet. I will explain a bit how it is performed. So here is a transformer block, and I will go into each detail of this transformer block. So we see that we already know feed-forward. So I will need to explain what does multi-head mean, residual connection, and layer normalization. And we see that the transformer block takes as input a sequence of tokens, and it will give as output another sequence of tokens, but it will be an hidden representation of this token. And this is powerful because we can stack the transformer block, and usually the more you stack the transformer block, the more powerful your model is. So here I will deal with what we call decoder-only transformer or causal transformer. So they will only look at previous token. So this model, for example, is used by ChatGPT. So here is a schematic representation of a self-attachment layer. So the self-attachment layer will use information from previous token, so that, for example, the token 5 use information from the token 4, 3, and so on. And you see that there is no connection here between the hidden representation of the token 1 and the hidden representation of the token 2. So that we can, in some way, see that we can do all this parallelly. You don't have to wait for the representation 1 to compute the representation 2. You only have to rely on the previous representation of 1. And this kind of self-attachment layer is very powerful because it can modelize some relationship between words. So here we see that the layer 6 has grabs some co-reference relation, and automatically using data. So I will repeat again the main idea of attachment mechanism. So it is based on a set of comparison to relevant items in some context. It is also based on a normalization of those scores to provide a probability distribution, and using this probability distribution we will perform a weighted sum to have our final vector. So here, let's say we have several hidden representation of my token. So we have several embeddings of my token. We can compute the similarity between different tokens using dot product attention. We'll normalize this score, and we will do the same thing. We perform a weighted sum. But Transformer introduced a more sophisticated way to represent the role of each word. So if you consider the attention process, you can see that a token can be the current focus of attention when being compared to all of the other preceding inputs. So in some way it is a query, but it is also can be a token that is being compared to the current focus of attention, so it can be some way a key. And also when we perform the weighted sum, it has a role as a value. So here we see that there are three roles: key, query, key, and value. And transformers will capture these three different roles so that they introduce three different weight matrices to project the input vector into the representation of its role as a key, as a query, and as a value. So now let's take again our attention process. Here we see that we replace it by the key, the query of our current focus of attention. And the query will be compared to all the key of the other tokens, including the key of its own. And when we do the weighted sum, we will use the value. And also, transformers introduce a scaling method to avoid some numerical issues. So this is an illustrated approach. So here, the token 3 is my current focus of attention. So we'll use the query. And this query will be compared to the key of itself, but also to the key of 2 and to the key of 1. Then the result we will perform a weighted sum using the value and the softmax. At the end, we have the new representation of my token 3. And I want to emphasize the fact that we can all parallelize this calculation. So since each output is computed independently, the entire process can be parallelized by taking advantage of matrix multiplication. So here we can pack all the tokens into one matrix X, and we can multiply this matrix by the key matrix, the query matrix, and the value matrix. So at the end, the self-attachment process is this single equation. So this is very elegant and simple to understand. And so the result from multiplying the query and the key is an attachment matrix. And as we want to predict the next word, we will apply a mask here so that we don't attend to the next word. Okay, so now I explain a bit more about the self-attachment layer, but here you see that we have multi-head attachment. So what does it mean? So different words in a sentence can relate to each other in many different ways simultaneously. And it is difficult for a transformer block to capture all kinds of parallel relations among its inputs. So we will introduce a set of self-attachment layers called heads that reside in the same depth in a model, and they will have their own parameters, their own weight matrices. So that we can, at the same level of abstraction, capture different aspects of relationships among inputs. So here we have weight matrices for the first head, weight matrices for the second, and so on. We have a result for each head. So each head is a self-attachment layer. We will concatenate the result and train a linear layer to project back into the initial space. So, it is the calculus version. Okay, so now I will need to introduce residual connection and layer normalization. So I explained the hardest part. The rest is very simple to understand, I think. So residual connection pass information from a lower layer to a higher layer without going through the intermediate layer. So it will skip some layer. So here you see that we have a matrix X. We apply self-attachment and we will copy the matrix X again. So this is the residual connection. And we do this because it introduces more stabilities in the training, so that information can flow better in the model, and so that we don't forget. We avoid to forget too much information from earlier layer. And layer normalization is very simple as well to understand. It is so you take the hidden representation, so the unbending of each token, and you calculate the mean and the standard deviation, and you normalize according to it. And also to grasp the position of each token, we will introduce positional embeddings, so that we have an embedding that represents the position of token. So we can train this embedding in the same way as we train word embeddings, or we can use a static function that will map, for example, an integer 1 to a real value vectors.
So you mean position in the sentence? Position.
Yeah, for example, Janet is the first token in my sentence, Will is the second token, and so on. It is a problem because if we don't introduce positional encoding, the model cannot understand very well the position of tokens. It might be clearer when I will introduce a bidirectional transformer, but the attention process can be permutation invariant. That means that you can apply a permutation operation on the tokens and the result will be the same. And here we'll introduce artificially the position using positional encoding. So if you want to perform next word prediction, we can take the final representation of the final token at the final transformer block, and we will multiply this representation by the transpose of the embedding layer, so that we'll have a probability distribution on the next word. And so it is the same thing. Here, at each time, I will have my next word and I will train it using the loss. And I can do conditional generation, so it is very used nowadays. So, for example, when you use ChatGPT or any kind of language model, you give a prefix. This will be your prompt, and the language will generate the next token based on your prefix text, based on your prompt. So this is what we call conditional generation. So here I present you what we call a causal language model or a decoder only language model, but we also have what we call bidirectional language model. So you may have heard about BERT, and BERT means bidirectional encoding representation from transformers. And here, they take information from left and from right. That means that when you calculate the attention matrix, you look at all the tokens. So you don't apply a mask. But know how to train a model, because we can't perform next word prediction if we look at all the tokens. We cheat in some way. So we will introduce a new way to train a model, which is called masked language modeling, and it is very simple to understand. You will randomly mask some token, and you will try to predict this mask token. There is also a substitution. You will substitute some tokens with other tokens, and you will try to predict whether it is a substitution or not.
In some sense, you don't follow the sentence that you want.
And with this kind of model, we can perform sequence classification, token classification, and here is the schema of the transformer model originally introduced by the first papers that introduced this idea. Attention is all you need, and so I will not go into the detail, but they introduce an encoder-decoder transformer. But nowadays, we don't use this kind of architecture. Usually, we only use an encoder or a decoder. So, for example, GPT models use only the decoder part, whereas BERT models use only the encoder part. And using decoder model, we can generate new tokens, whereas with encoder, we can't do it. It is not a generative model. And this is my last slide before the conclusion. But so this is a table from the paper that introduced GPT-3, and here you see that they scale this kind of model very. If you look at GPT-3. 175 billion parameters. So this is composed of 96 transformer blocks. the hidden dimension is this. This is very high dimension, and we have a number of heads of 96. And also the batch size is 3.2 million, so that means that you give 3 million tokens, you have a result, and using this result, you will perform the error backpropagation. So in conclusion, we see that tokenization is splitting text into individual tokens. A language model is a probabilistic model that computes the probability of a sequence of words and computes the probability of an incoming word. N-gram are simple probabilistic language models based on Markov assumption, and they only count occurrences of words to estimate probabilities. We skip this. Unbending represents word meaning as a vector. Logistic regression are discriminative model based on a nonlinear function which is called the sigmoid function. We see that feed-forward neural network handle longer input and generalize better compared to n-grams thanks to unbendings, but they have a fixed context window. Recurrent neural networks handle temporal data inherently in the architecture, and they have an infinite context window compared to feed-forward neural networks. But there is one drawback: hidden states have local information. Information flow better if we introduce some gated mechanism. This is used by LSTM models. Attention mechanism solves the bottleneck problem to produce dynamically derived context vectors. And transformers use self-attention layers combined with feed-forward layers to handle more complex distant relationships between tokens, enable parallelization due to independent computation between tokens, but they have a fixed context windows like feed-forward neural networks. So there are a lot of research to combine the idea of recurrent neural network and transformers, because here we want transformers that has a huge context window, possibly an infinite context window, so that we can give a book, for example, and it can understand a book directly. So the first transformer has a context window of I think 500 tokens nearly, and nowadays researchers managed to increase this context window to 1,000, 10,000, and even some researchers claim that they can handle 1 million tokens. So that means that at inference time you can give a book and it will directly understand the book without any training. And here are some resources. I will not go into the detail, but if you are a visualization person, you can look at these resources. If you want to go into the details, there are some research papers that introduce transformers. If you want to implement all this kind of thing from scratch, here are some resources. And also, I recommend you Apprendre les langues aux machines, a new course at Collège de France on natural language processing. And I saw all my slides were inspired by speech and language processing. I take some schema from this book. That's all. Thank you.